those people in line for Barksdale's cookies I saw. I was
damn.
That looked bad. There's like 200 people in line.
Yeah.
Are
you going to grab some when we go on Saturday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm trying to go this week sometime because my wife always buys.
Oh, yeah.
So we can go twice in some form. But yeah, now with the Saturday ones.
Do you like to just go or do you like to do any
I don't mind walking around.
Yeah.
It's just like, but I used to have to do that for the paper, going around covering and taking pictures of like, so I knew if it was, it's the first Thursday, it's the twins triplets contest.
Yeah.
Or it's probably the cow pie throwing contest if it's Wednesday and blah, 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 blah.
Wait, can you explain what a cow pie is?
It's basically a dried up pile of cow poop. It's in the pasture, and you can pick it when it's dried out because they eat mostly grass and stuff and cellulosic material. It stays in that shape. It dries out, and you get this kind of frisbee made out of cow poop.
No.
Yeah.
You would throw it at people?
No, what they do at the fair is they have a contest you can throw it the farthest.
Oh, I thought it was like cow pie fight.
No.
Everyone goes nuts.
No, most of the time we leave it alone.
Yeah.
On the farm,
good.
but
Good.
they throw it, and then they have the rubber chicken throwing contest too.
Yeah.
And then chicken calling contest, and all the stuff they do at the Pioneer Hall.
Yeah.
But otherwise, no. My favorite thing at the fair is I haven't seen the new foods yet. I want to try the finisher or whatever from Rib Shack, I think.
What's in that?
It looks like it's a potato and bacon and brisket and mac and cheese.
Yeah.
I think it's just a continuation of what they had last year.
Yeah.
I think.
What's your go-to fair food?
Cheese curds, probably.
Yeah, I love the cheese. One stand.
Yeah, and mini donuts. There's also that little triangle there in front of the Midway.
Yeah.
But it's in trees, and they have mini donuts and stuff in the morning, and there's always a line for that.
With like sugar and stuff on it?
Yeah, but as a kid, I always liked the root beer. You could get like fresh root beer. They had a giant barrel, and it was ice cold root beer. And I always thought that was the coolest thing because I never had root beer, I guess, unless I was at the fair.
Yeah.
But
have you tried this pickle beer?
No.
Would you like to?
I could try it, but I would probably not.
Really?
My taste buds are just like shot. Yeah, I can taste bitter and I can taste salty and stuff like that, but that's about it.
You just care if it's cold. That's all that
Cold.
matters. So go to the 27-degree stand. I get that.
Yeah.
I'll be there too. I'll be there Saturday.
Yeah, I will at least do it before the concert. Somebody else might be going to the concert in my place. But otherwise,
You'll be there drinking a beer. That's all that matters. Who are you jealous of this week? Tell us about your guest that you brought on.
Oh, it's Todd Buchanan. He's called Med Meeting Images or Med Meeting Photography. So he does medical conventions now. But before that, he was he was a decorated news photographer.
Yep.
Working at the Orange County Register. Well, he went to school at Western Kentucky, which is like, there's like only like 3 schools where you can get a degree in photojournalism. Western Kentucky, Orange County Register.
He said the other one.
He worked at Cedar Rapids Gazette for about 9 months because that was kind of a hometown paper.
And that's where you guys crossed paths.
Yes, because I had heard he was coming to town, and I just happened to be, a lease was up, and I was like, hey, we could be roommates.
Yeah.
And it worked out just fine because the paper I worked at was at the Iowa City Press Citizen, and I was only a block away. So I and we were an afternoon paper, so you could close the bars down.
Yeah.
And then go do your work, and then still have time to get a deadline. But then he went to the Louisville Courier and then the Philadelphia Inquirer, and then he moved to Chicago when he started freelancing, and that's when I started freelancing too, from 96 to 2000. So we met up, and my favorite thing is we did the Democratic Convention in Chicago in 96, and we were freelancing for the New York Times, and that's when they were just starting to feel out the digital. They were still doing film. They brought a film processor into the production tent, and like for all the major news organizations had a big tent, and they had a processor, but I had an experience with digital cameras at the time, so I said, you can do this digital camera and it'll work fine. And I got to stay at the Continental or whatever, which is right downtown Chicago, up on the upper floor because the rooms have been given away, so all they had was like a presidential suite. So I had this chocolate White House.
Bummer.
It was like a chocolate White House. It was in my room. And I took it back with me to the. It was.
It stayed stable on your way back.
Yeah, it was about that big or so. And so anyway, but yeah, so we were freelancing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's when I met him, and then he started these event photography and stuff like that. And he treats it like it's a news organization. So he hires basically about everybody's a former or current news photographer.
Yeah, he's done so many cool things, and what I love about the guests that you bring on, all these cool photographers, there's so much story behind the photos that they're able to capture and the ones they get these prizes for, and it's just so fun listening to a story and being engulfed in that moment and where they were at in that moment and whatnot.
We could go on for hours.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what we do, like when we go out to meals, at these conventions and stuff. Sometimes we're able to sit down as a group, or it could be 3 people, it could be 10 people.
Yeah.
And he's always got the best stories.
He was great to have on, and great to get his insight on just what all goes into photography, even stuff you don't even think about, like lighting and getting it all ready. And it was a great conversation with Todd today. So thank you for bringing him on.
You're welcome. It was very fun.
Enjoy, guys. Well, welcome back to the Jealous Podcast. I am here with Rodney today, and he brought on a guest that he is jealous of. Rodney, do you want to say why you are jealous of Todd?
I'm not sure why I'm jealous of him. Like I said, I'm not jealous of a lot of people, but I guess, sure, he's one of them. As far as just his experience and the knowledge in his head, I guess that's, I've always looked up to him, I guess. Yeah, the bio you sent me of him, it's pretty extensive and pretty impressive. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Todd? We're really excited to chat with you today, and we'd love to get know a little bit more about you.
Well, I can say it right back at Rodney, but my history, come from Iowa City area. Grew up around North Liberty and started out very early on in high school, but even kind of before that, I became very involved in horses and riding horses. And as that interest grew, we started to show all over the Midwest, and we travel all over the Midwest. And when it came to photography, at about 16, my grandmother gave me a 1931 Argus C3, which was they called it the brick. It was just like solid metal. All I knew is this dial, you turned it this way, it made it darker, and this way it made it lighter. I had no idea. And I started taking pictures of the horses and things like that because they would cooperate. They're just standing there. And I think on my first roll, my mom proceeded to completely embarrass me by showing one of my photographs to an editor of a horse magazine. And of course, you're 16 at the time. You're like, thanks, Mom, for really embarrassing me. But the next month, that photo was the full color, one page, like the amateur photo of the month sort of thing. And it's like, this is kind of interesting,
So when you took that photo, did you have any idea what you were doing at the time, or did you just kind of click it and got the image you got?
It was, the funny thing is, okay, we're all Iowa here, right?
Uh-huh.
So it was late in the afternoon. The sun was kind of low in the sky, and they were is the mare and her foal kind of grazing on this hillside with some big trees kind of around, and the setting looked like, if you didn't know any better, it looked like it was the early morning mist with the sun and the fingers of God coming from the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for us Iowa folks, really, on the backside of that hill that you didn't see was a gravel road, and the dust all kicked up. So it looked like it was early morning mist. And of course, it was dust from a pickup truck. But I'll admit, even all these years later, it was a very pretty picture that looked like an early morning mist with a mare and foal grazing. And so from that point, I was kind of thought, this is pretty cool, because I thought I was going to be either training horses or a vet, or something like that. And so what I started doing was taking pictures of the people involved in the horse business. And that kind of got me interested because, I just always found that it's sort of interesting photographing people and challenging. And fortunately, my high school newspaper too had a really great journalism advisor so 16 at the time, and gave me a lot of film, and I started taking pictures of the horses. I think by like 17, I was actually taking pictures for the magazines at the time too, the horse magazines, as well as my high school newspaper and yearbook. And so eventually that led to photojournalism school and kind of led me down that path. But,
Where'd you go
it
to
was,
school at?
I think one of the things I was very fortunate is good high school. I went to West High School in Iowa City, and our journalism advisor there at the time, I had no idea. I wound up like my junior year going to Ball State journalism workshop, and I got there and all the other people was like, "Oh, you're from West High in Iowa City? You've got Ben Van Zandt as your..." He's like, I had no idea. I just thought he was my high school advisor. And everyone's like, "No, he's like one of the best in the country," and so
how cool.
Ben Van Zandt was this phenomenal guy who their books consistently won national awards for best design and things like that. And so kind of each step along the way, I was very fortunate in being exposed to great people. And then Western Kentucky was where I wound up going to school because they had a great photojournalism program. And that, then led me into the newspapers and photojournalism area. So
from your perspective, what's the difference between taking photos and like photography? Because there's clearly a difference between me grabbing my cell phone and snapping a few photos, right? But then what Rodney does and what you do, it's elevated, right? So to you, what's the difference between those types of photos?
Well, I think the thing I still my brother even just not too long ago, his faith in me, but he was kind of asking the question is like, so why, with all these cameras around nowadays and everyone can take a picture on their phone, why do people really need you? and I always just say, millions of crappy pictures out there,
Yeah.
If you want to, it's a two-edged sword. I say, I think it's great because we're seeing lots more images out there. And I think we're seeing a lot of things in our lives now, especially on the video side of people with cell phone cameras and AKA George Floyd and other situations.
Right.
So I think it's great that there's lots of pictures out there. But I think what's nice for me is I almost feel like it's separated some of the field where in the past, I guess, used to get lots of calls from small businesses or something like that, or people just starting out, and they didn't have, they want some nice pictures from their event or their product or something like that. And it was always, "Oh, we don't have much money,"
Yeah.
And nowadays, you can take a pretty decent picture on your own.
Yeah.
But if you've got something where you've sunk, $1 million into a new product or a big important event with your shareholders or something like that, you're going to want to have, good photography. And I think we also live in a very visually sophisticated time.
Yeah.
You think about all of us every day are bombarded by thousands of images. And I think we have all become pretty good judges of what's good and what's crap. And, so good images help put your message across, and they can communicate a lot, So, I feel like, people can smell out a staged or phony looking picture pretty quickly. And, so I think there's still a lot of value there. I think all we're kind of bringing to the table, I think oftentimes, is many years of experience and how to, capture those images that hopefully help convey and carry across the message that will reach out to people, hopefully touch people, or make them smile, or, in photojournalism cases, sometimes push back or see things that I think that's always the beauty of what I did in photojournalism was, my feeling was I would get this special access to go places, whether it's the locker room or it's inside a nuclear containment facility or on an aircraft carrier or something like that. In the back of my mind, I was always trying to think of how can I take someone by the hand, if you will, and show them something or help them see something in a way that they had never thought of.
Yeah, I think that's your point.
Or perceived,
Right there is the difference is a different perspective. You guys see things through your lens and you're able to set up lights and cameras that people don't normally see or they won't see through their cell phone. So I think, to me, that's what I believe the difference is. What about you?
There's a little bit of the, like you were saying about the experience too, how we can we're viewing through the camera through our years of experience, but it's like they're not paying us for the hours we're working. They're just paying for the years of experience.
Yeah.
And kind of being able to filter all that and try to coalesce it down into a single image. Yeah. I always call it was I always felt influenced by the wires because they had that easel. You'd flip and you either had a fat square or a tall horizontal, we would call it, and you had to put all your image into that.
Yeah.
And it's just like you try to squeeze as much information or take out, and it just made you shoot very tight and very, it was just, I just remember that was kind of like your trial by fire.
Yeah.
Being able to do that and the logistics. Like it used to be more of a craft when it was film. You had to be able to expose the film for, printing on toilet paper. Some of the newsprint was not good, so you had to have a contrasting image. It had to be well lit. All of that stuff instead of. And then when the digital came, there was about, I call it 8 years of dark time when, digital's trying to catch up with film, but it's not there. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden in the early 2000s, it really caught on and surpassed film. So now it's more about the artistry and it's about the storytelling. Really, you don't have to talk about equipment as much or the logistics of getting somewhere. That one friend of our, David Gudenfelder, he would talk about, you go get this shot of something in Africa, but it's like he spent 2 days and he had a canoe and he had a cooler and he had a generator and he had to take all of that along just to get one photo out of the desert somewhere. Yeah. And I mean, and Todd could tell you he spent.
Let's lead into that. So
well,
go for it.
Well, I was going to say we have some of the images. There's one of Magic Johnson.
Sam's going to pull it up.
Yeah, and just to say, hopefully this is one you had to set up lights for.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So when you worked for the Orange County Register, you had to. It wasn't just show up, sit courtside, and take a picture. You had to get there the day before or the night before. Okay. We got
Kareem. Yeah. Kareem. And so. Actually, if you looked at that picture very closely up in his goggle glasses, you might see the lights. There were strobes. We'd literally, so we were the Orange County Register. So this is around 83, 84, 85. And they were one of the first papers that really had a big commitment to doing color photography in the daily paper. And in order to get the good quality images, you've got they spent millions on these presses, and in order to get the best quality out of that, good lighting was always really important. And because if it was kind of shadowy or something, it would get very muddy on the presses. Like you say, you're printing on just a step above toilet paper, and so you had to make sure it looked good and the lighting was great. And so literally for every Lakers game I would cover, I would have to go up there hours beforehand. They would rope these big strobe packs, there'd be 4 of them, up to the catwalks, and I have to install them and wire them all together and drop a wire down which would connect to the camera so they would all sync up and the flashes would all fire in that millisecond. And and the other thing is they didn't go pop, 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 pop. You had a pop and you had to wait for about a second for them to all recharge. Because if you did, you'd blow a circuit. So in other words, you had to have your timing down when you're covering the sports. And Sports Illustrated and many other big magazines all do kind of the same thing. And you'll still see them even to this day. If you ever sat in a stadium and instead of looking down at the court, you kind of looked up at the ceiling, you'd see these flashes going off. Yeah. And that's what those all were. So in order to get quality, you had to do a ton of work.
Well, and you were shooting on slide film too, right?
Yeah, slide film was not color negative, which was more forgiving.
Yeah.
So slide film, you had to be like right on the money.
And you did you did it on the road too, on road games.
I took those packs to the Boston Garden, to Phoenix, to Dallas. It was
when you would set that up. Would it be a situation where other photographers that are on the court with you, they would be able to benefit from that light too, or everyone has to set up their own lights?
Yeah.
That is insane.
Yeah. And they were not
cheap. But there was a limit usually in most stadiums to like about 4 photographers who could do that. So usually there's like the team photographer, then maybe Associated Press, the Los Angeles Times, and us in LA, for example.
Yeah. And
I was at the Orange County Register. And or if Sports Illustrated came in, 1 or 2 of those might get bumped. Yes, you could shoot without the lights, but they've gotten a lot better in most of the new modern stadiums with a lot brighter lighting. But back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, there are some dark dungeons that you had to go and take pictures in, and so
it wasn't the focus, whereas now you need the images and you need the video.
They want 20 photos, by the first half or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And back then,
weren't you developing the film on the plane back? Or sometimes you have a charter, or no?
In a lot of cases, I would have maybe a runner who would take film at like halftime back down to Orange County, and then I would stay and finish shooting the rest of the game, and then I would have to wait around for an hour or 2 afterwards to rope all the stuff back down. You had to take it in and out every time.
Oh, they wouldn't let you leave
because
it up there,
catwalks were so small.
Yeah.
And but again, it was the commitment to quality, and it was a good lesson. It taught me a lot, and it's something that a lot of people just kind of take for granted. They see a great picture in the newspaper the next day, and there was a lot that went into it.
Well, that commitment to quality is what got you were part of that. Your first Pulitzer Prize was for the sports coverage of the '84 Olympics.
Yeah.
And then that's where you only had 3 credentialed photographers, and you were able to shoot too. But you guys beat out the wire services. The LA Times probably had 20 photographers. Who knows? But you were kind of like the mouse that roared almost at that point.
So we in Orange County. I came in December of '83. So the Olympics in Los Angeles were summer of '84. Well, the Olympic Organizing Committee already had given out, there was a very defined set of credentials. And the Los Angeles Times, I want to say, had something like 28 credentials. They also paid like $1 million to be what they call the national pool. So in other words, that meant they had even better access. And whereas we only had 3, and I was the new kid on the block, they'd already assigned those 3. And so I was covering events where, I didn't have any credential. So I'm shooting from wherever I could. And
that's that bicycle shot.
One of the big things right over my shoulder was the cycling race. The 100K cycling race was going to take place in Orange County and Mission Viejo. And so I spent like a couple days scouting the whole route, trying to figure out where might be the best place to try and, cover it. And eventually found a place on a hillside that overlooked the finish line. But I literally was going to have to camp out, and I got permission from the people to camp out overnight in that spot And I got one of the huge lenses from Canon that was brand new. At the time, they said it was like worth $60,000 or something, you know. And I found what I thought was a great spot, considering I didn't have any credential. And so, as it turns out, the way the cycling race finished, this is the first time an American ever won a gold in any cycling event in the Olympics. And what happened was, at the finish of the race, it came down, the race was so close, the Canadian and the American were literally, each time someone would push the pedal, they would go, it was that close, you know, as the wheel would go in front of the other. And normally a lot of those big races, you get down to the finish and someone's like far enough ahead that they just let them go on and win, you know.
Yeah.
But this one was a battle to the very finish line. So the position where all the credential photographers was right at the finish line, because normally that's where the picture is. The guy comes riding across and his arms up in the air. This case, it was so intense that they didn't react to who the winner was until like 50 feet past. So all those credential guys are getting his ass. Me, I'm sitting on the hill and he's riding straight towards me. So I'm following him all the way in. And so I, you know, as I like to say, I call it planned luck, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. It's a lot of, it goes back to the lighting thing, right? It's just stuff you don't even think that you have to pay attention to. But like you said, you went out scouting, you stayed in a tent back, like you had to do all this research to prepare for that one photo that's going to be everywhere. Do you think people, is that still relative now in these, like the Olympics or the NBA or whatever? Is that sort of planning still relative?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, and I when I watch a Super Bowl game or an NBA championship, it's like, I know what they're going through, the preparation, the work they've gone through to do that. And really, you know, in the end, ultimately, it's a great story, but it just matters whether you get the picture or not. I don't expect everyone to appreciate all the work you went to. You know, I think they just want to see the great shot, and I can't blame them. And you know, I think that's, you know, that's the fun part about it. But what I do kind of enjoy is, just as the athletes are out there competing on the field, the photographers are on the sideline competing to make sure they get the great picture too. And it's a lot of fun, you know.
There's a picture of him holding the lens too, I think, that you sent us. Yeah.
Oh,
so
cool.
It was a 1250 f5.6 or something, and it came in two pieces.
Oh,
so there's like a focusing unit, and you put that on there. It took two tripods sometimes to hold it, but you were one of the first to actually get to use it, and they just happened to get it in for the Olympics. Yeah.
Cuddle with that while you're in your tent.
That was ironically too, after I'd been up for about 48 hours straight, because right after that cycling race, at the newspaper that evening, a fire broke out in the paper rolls underneath the newspaper building, and smoke started pouring up through the floor. And so we had to the firefighters literally coming in their masks and they're saying, "You've got to get out of here," you know. But we actually had a sister plant nearby, and I wound up like racing these pages back and forth from the design back in the layout day when you literally pasted up pages. And we were up like all night, you know, covering the fire in our own newspaper, as well as getting the paper out for the next day. And I wound up, I think, going like 72 hours straight. And I remember I had to return that lens too. So I had to drive up to LA at like 2 a.m. And on the way back, I was so tired. I pulled over on the side of the road, and all I remember is waking up and some highway patrolman knocking on my window. "You can't sleep here." You know, I was like,
I gotta get the lens back. Yeah, Roddy mentioned a lot of things that you have been through. You've been held at gunpoint in Iraq. You've rappelled out of helicopters and trekked across the Arctic. You've done so many cool things, but I wanted to ask you, what are some of your favorite assignments to have?
The things like the Olympics, I think were just really cool because you were there right in the environment where people are doing these amazing things, reaching to the heights and actually, even some of the smaller events at the Olympics can be very cool because some of these folks, for example, in Seoul, I knew about a canoe kayak guy who was originally from Iowa and but now he was in like Michigan or something like that. But I can't remember the exact thing, but I knew he was really good and had a good chance. And I was covering it for USA Today, and I was kind of open that afternoon. And I said, "Hey, do you mind if I go out and cover this canoe kayak?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's another sport. Go for it." I get out there. The guy winds up winning a gold in his first event. And this canoe kayak, they have to stand up, and it's literally, so the upper body muscles and strength these guys have is incredible. But he had like a 1,000-meter race, and then he had to turn around, and his next event was immediately after that. So he wins the gold, and he's got to go back out there.
Do it again.
Another time, and he won again.
Oh, that's so cool.
And the sad thing to me, though, was, that it was incredible what he did. Any great athlete having to do back-to-back, really tiring things. And what was sad to me is that night, he got like 5 seconds on the Olympic broadcast.
Yeah.
But do you think we missed beach volleyball in the quarterfinal round? I'm like,
yeah.
Really? This guy, he's been living out of a van for like the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Just trying to get there to the Olympics. Do you think he's going to get any Nike contract? No. He's a canoe kayak guy. But that's what I love about covering some of the things like that is seeing people who've given it their all and they reach that spot, So, but I think the other thing, other things is history. I think it's just always neat to be able to be there covering. You can sense it when history is happening, and those are pretty cool. But the geographic, we were retracing the steps of history. Oh. And I thought we would sit every night. It was an Arctic expedition from Sir John Franklin, one of the first British explorers looking for the Northwest Passage. But each night we would sit down after we'd been canoeing all day, and read the diaries from 1821, I believe it was. And what was insane was how little the landscape had changed in those 150 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, I think all of it, to me, I think the neat part is we're capturing images that hopefully capture a little bit of history and allow people to either see it that day, the next day, or even 20 years later, I think that's, and they pay me to do this stuff.
That's the coolest part, right?
So,
well, with your resume, we could have, this is just like when we get together for supper and things like that at these events we cover, and even at like the Breeders' Cup and stuff like that. It just, we could sit there all day, but we only have like 45 minutes or so. But basically, so you worked at papers, you worked at Orange County Register, and then you came and worked at the Cedar Rapids Gazette for maybe 9 months, and that's when I met him for the first time.
Oh, okay.
But I felt like I knew you because I'd read about you the whole time. And he was like, here's an Iowan that left and was doing well, and we actually were roommates for that 6 months, 7 months. We lived above the Brugger's Bagel Bakery in Iowa City. And luckily it didn't burn down at that time, but you woke up every morning to that smell of bagels.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. But then he worked a night shift And then you got me going on the 1-3-5 thing. It's like if you want to stay up for 24 hours, sleep for 1, 3, or 5 hours, you can stay up for 24 hours. Oh. You would drive to Louisville after getting off at 11, sleep for an hour, and then drive to Louisville, and you were working on getting the job there. And then, I mean, you did some amazing stuff in Louisville, and then you went to Philadelphia Inquirer, and that's where you were at the first Iraq War, right? Was that? Yeah, you were at you were at the Inquirer, and then, but then, I mean, now, I mean, you spent probably more time doing this new thing with the event photography. You've kind of cornered the market on medical conventions and things like that. And
so I think what's kind of interesting is to see, you know, how your path changes over time, and how, but also how kind of the world and its media and its demands change over time. And one of the things that happened is somewhere around, you know, I left Philadelphia around 97 or so, or no, I'm sorry, 94 or so, and moved with my then, you know, girlfriend at the time, but later my wife. We moved to Chicago. She was in retail, but started freelancing there, and tons of work in the 90s for the Times, the Post, USA Today, Business Week, Fortune, you know, all that kind of stuff. But the thing you started to see is somewhere around 2001, when the .com era was going on, the web was just sort of coming on, and advertisers shifting to online versus magazines and newspapers. And somewhere around 9/11 or so, it's just like the switch kind of changed. And so the publications that we used to work for all the time just got smaller and smaller because the advertising got smaller and smaller. One thing that was really good for freelance photographers for many years was the annual report. Everyone always wanted their big glossy annual report, you know, with these great photos that made their company look great. And somewhere around that same time, the SEC said, no, you can do them as PDFs. And after that, they were like, we'll just put all the numbers in a PDF and forget all that money and investment on nice glossy photos, you know. And so that went off a cliff. But the next thing I started seeing is people asking me to do, since I was so used to doing digital, they wanted things for early social media or the website or things. And because I was so used to doing it, and I was digital pretty early on, I started getting calls about these meetings and conventions in Chicago. And you know, I started to see that there was kind of a niche there for, they needed them quickly. And a lot of other guys were still wedded to film, or the people would say, oh, we get the pictures like 10 days later inside a disc, and there's no captions, and we can't figure out, you know, who's who. Well, in Rodney's and my and most of the newspaper world, we had to have IDs and names and all that information embedded in all those files. It was standard operating procedure. But for a lot of my clients, they're like, wow, you can do that? You know, you could find our pictures quickly. And so, so that's one way I kind of ate a lot of guys' lunch, because I was geeky enough and digitally, you know, early on. And I think that's, you know, I think if you look at any profession, it costs a lot to be out there on that bleeding edge, but if you're out there early and doing it well, it can have huge dividend down the road. You know?
Have you seen your style of photography shift at all, or evolve from going from these assignments where you're in Iraq and at the Olympics to now you're doing these conventional digital stuff? Like, how has your style of photography shifted?
You know, in some ways, I would say it hasn't too much. Good photos are still good photos. I think what I've become more aware of and attuned to the clients is making sure I'm getting the right people that they want and the right, you know, faces, and getting to know, you know, who's important there. And I think, though, so going and photographing a meeting isn't the most, you know, exciting thing to do compared to covering the Olympics or, you know, the Gulf War or something. But I guess the attitude I take is I still want to go out there and try and make the best picture I can, and do something good for the client and have some professional integrity about, because I saw a lot of guys who later in their career had been in a newspaper or something like that, covered the same event for 20 years in a row. And you'd see some guys like, I got to go back out to the county fair again and, make another picture. Whereas I admired the guys that were the other way. They were like, I'm going to try and do something different. I'm going to go out and cover that county fair I've covered 20 times and maybe go with an idea, a concept, and then try and just apply that to the images.
Yeah.
And I admired those guys. And so for me, I feel like I walk into a room where there's a session I have to cover, and there's 6 people in a room with 200 empty seats and one speaker at a podium projecting slides. Yeah. So my challenge is to walk in there is, how do I make a good, interesting picture out of this? And so you start to learn how to frame up things and get creative and just do your best to make something that's boring and mundane look as interesting as possible. Because a lot of life is that,
Well, it goes. Oh, sorry. It goes back to the beginning where we were talking about the difference between a good, like just taking a photo, and photography. It's that perspective that you bring to the table and your ability to be open-minded and look at an empty convention center and be like, how can I make this great for my clients and make a great image?
Yeah. It's like moment. We always said moment is king.
Yeah.
And if you can't get moment, then go big graphic. So it's either go big or go home.
Yeah.
I think even some of the event things, it's not being satirical, but every once in a while they kind of have in the back of their head, we call it the lonely doctor or tiny doctor.
Oh, gosh.
We try to see how we can get a silhouette somewhere in the frame, and just how small, just to show the scope of things. Because, in newspapers we call it a thrill of monotony when you were talking about, covering the same thing 20 years in a row.
Yeah.
But then you try something different each one, and I can tell. And like he shot something, and I can just see like he's up on a ladder, and I can see him 50 feet away. I was like, God damn! I could see the light. You could just see. I knew what he was shooting because the light was just perfect at that time. So it was always cool to, like we always say, greet the light. That early morning light. Get there. It comes streaming in. Even at the office we have here, it's like I rarely see it because usually I don't come into about 8 or 9. But if you come in here right at daybreak, the light comes from a direction you never see except for like 10 minutes every morning.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. But the same with these convention halls. You probably know every convention hall in the country now. And some worldwide ones too, because he does worldwide. So, where you just got back from Venice?
I was in Vienna last week. Yeah.
Ooh, that sounds nice.
So can you enjoy some of these places you go then? Or most of the time you're inside a convention center?
Well, you're inside a convention center most of the day, but usually, at least in the evenings, you can hopefully go out. But sometimes you have to do editing in the evenings. It all depends how busy it is. But a lot of times you're shooting during the day and editing at night. And sometimes you can stay on a day or two after, or come a day or two early. But there's times though. When you get back from somewhere where you've had a really super busy schedule, and you're like in Miami in February, and people are like, oh, did you go out and have dinner and go out to the beach? I'm like, no, I was in a convention center all day, all night.
Yeah,
that's what we always said about like.
I should just say you should say I went to Arkansas or something.
Yeah. Well, like you go to bowl games and cover, like I cover bowl games, and you cover NCAA events. It's like you're pretty much just inside there the whole time, and you don't get to see what the fans get to see sometimes. Yeah. And I don't think I've ever watched. I think I've watched one Iowa basketball game and one football game from the stands, but I'm like. Yeah, I just want to sit and watch a game sometime.
Is it too much to ask?
To that point. But like I said, I think I've said before, when you're at the Olympics, it's like, I'm at the goddamn Olympics.
Yeah.
When you start to get a little tired, like, shit, I'm at the Olympics, and there's only like 200 photographers in the whole world who are here right now. And so you have to get the job done.
Realization
you get the job
moment.
done. Yeah.
For sure.
Well, shoot, yeah. There's so much I would.
I know.
Oh my gosh, all the
No, I
time.
know.
Breeders' Cup, and I mean the stuff we saw there. It was just some of the racing was amazing. And you've covered. Yeah, one of my favorite things is when I went down to Louisville, and it was right around the Indianapolis 500. So we'd always say the Indianapolis 500 is the Kentucky Derby of car racing, or something like that. But we went up to the Little 500. That's the coolest thing up there at University of Indiana. So they do the fraternities, and what is it, 500 laps of the, and it.
Yeah, it's from the old Breaking Away movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where the fraternities and sororities, and then there's always the local, townies who ride in the race, and yeah, it's just is a load of fun. And what's kind of neat about what we did and what we do is the places we get to go and different things we get to see, and it's just very fortunate that we get to share that, but then it's our job to try and help you see that.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Well, before we let you go, I'm going to wrap up with the little Would You Rather photography edition game with you guys, just to pick your brain about it. I'm not going to lie. I took these from an article online because I have no idea what some of this means. But I still want to pick your brain regardless. So the first one was, would you rather use a zoom lens or a prime lens?
I would say it used to make a big difference back in the day. The zoom lenses early on were kind of not quite up to snuff, and the prime you'd have this bag of 6 lenses, whereas nowadays the lenses and technology have come a long way, and some of those zoom lenses are pretty damn nice, and it's nice not to carry like 6 lenses, because I can tell you, in those early days, you would, if you ever saw a film of like press events and stuff, you'll see photographers like half the time digging around their bag, changing lenses, and whereas now you got a couple, 2-3 lenses, and you're pretty well set. So, it used to be back in the day. What do you think, Roddy?
Yeah, I remember seeing pictures of the agency guys would have 5 cameras and 5 lenses. It just with the small little rangefinders they would do. Or there was a couple times like when you go out into the desert to shoot, they're like, or even going down by the ocean, you don't want to change lenses. Yeah. So because you'll get a little salt spray and there's sand, so you just keep the lens. So 2 zoom lenses are great right now, like a 20. I'd probably do a 24-70 and a 70-200, or now they got these 200 to 500s that are really nice, I guess. I haven't, So, zooms are good now.
Yeah.
I would have a couple of zooms. And that's pretty much all I did at the paper for 20 years. At the register was use 2 zoom lenses the whole time.
Yeah.
And a prime now. the long prime, it was nice to use those ultra telephotos, like a 500 or an 800 you borrow every once in a while. But,
Next one. Would you rather only be able to shoot with your phone or only be allowed 5 frames a day on whatever camera you please?
Phones have come a long way, and there are times when if I need to get something out real quick, because someone, wants it real fast, there's sometimes I'll just whip it out and shoot a few frames and then go back to my other camera.
Yeah.
I think the hard thing is, for something, it's great for a wide angle or something like that. It's just the phones are still not quite there for a telephoto. So yes, if I'm doing some close up with just some friends right there, or some wide angle things, or even some panoramas, sure, I would say phone's great. But when you're photographing something at a distance, unfortunately, it's like it can't stabilize, it can't zoom out enough. So, but we're getting there, So.
Yeah. I would have the phone, but I'd have some auxiliary lenses or something to
for
stick
backup.
for telephoto. But no, my phone is full constantly. I have a terabyte iPhone. Yeah. And I have stuff on there. I do that on assignments. I'll just click. Just says backup. Yeah. It's a great backup. Yeah.
Dang, a terabyte on your phone. That's insane. Would you rather only be allowed to shoot in hard sunlight or not be allowed to post-process your photos?
Only
Uh,
only shoot in harsh sunlight,
Yeah.
or not be able to. I mean, I'm okay with not post processing, I guess.
yeah, not
Yeah.
post, not post,
Yeah.
probably, because harsh sunlight is just so hard to make nice pictures in. You know, in California, we always had to deal with that. You know, the sun was, you had sun so many of the days of the year, so awful.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot of techniques of how to light people outside and make it look like it's sunlight, but yet be able to control it so it wasn't such harsh shadows.
Right.
And so that's a whole art you kind of learned in itself. And so, I'd probably say you hate to shoot in harsh sunlight. So,
Yeah.
Is that your answer?
Yes.
Yes.
No, I would have scrims and and I would move them into the shade
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
We'd make it work.
Well, they use it the geographic. I forgot who it was that would say, get up, greet the light, and then after 8 o'clock in the morning, just go back to sleep and wake up at 5 because the light.
Yeah,
Is,
it's not good.
It's just,
Last one before we let you go is, would you rather only be allowed to use the same camera forever or the same computer forever?
feels like I use the same camera forever.
Yeah.
At one
camera,
point.
I'd say same camera, because really ultimately in the end it's about your ability to what you do with that camera. I remember one teacher I had would always joke about son, you're too far back. He says, use that other zoom lens you don't have, your feet. Walk a little closer. His thing was, you don't need a big zoom lens, just move.
Right.
Like,
Oh,
it's
funny.
like, so I think the computer demands are changing and bring along so many other capabilities. So I could live with probably the same camera for a long time. And
Yeah. When I was at the paper, I transmitted to my phone so many times from football games.
Yeah.
I could just plug a little USB cable and pull an image off and send right on the spot. And there was even a tiny little app that could put an IPTC on there or put that info on there about what it was for. So, but yeah, I guess, and we're at the age too where they say, you ask, does it have a lifetime warranty? And then you go, well, I'm 60, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's a lifetime warranty, definitely. So.
Awesome. That's all I have for you, Todd. Sorry, Sam's making little side comments to us now. What? Oh,
What do you use for, you use the Panasonic, don't you? No, Olympus. That's right. You're on Olympus.
Yep.
is that the camera you'd have forever?
I could live with it. I did Nikons and Canons for 40 years. A little bit of a Chevy Ford debate there. But some of these newcomers, like the Sony's Olympus, they're pretty good stuff too. I say nowadays the quality is pretty darn good across the line.
Yeah.
I always tell people, I guess if I'd leave, something with people is, you don't need a Ferrari to drive around the streets of Des Moines, to take your pictures. I always tell people, get the simplest, fairly simple one and start out, not too many dials, knobs. Nowadays, a lot of them have a ton of stuff on them, but the simpler, the better. And the lighter, the better too, because you start loading yourself down and you'll be like, I don't want to carry all that weight with me. And once you start not carrying that weight with you, then why the camera?
Right.
If you're going to leave it behind. So even if you're just using your phone, you can still make some pretty phenomenal pictures that way too. So keep it light, keep it simple, until you get comfortable to the point where you want more things and gizmos. So
I love it. Well, thank you for sitting down with us today, Todd, and hearing about your story with photography and what makes photography. It's also much more than it seems in a photo. There's so much more behind the photo. So we appreciate your time today.
Okay.
absolutely. And thank you for your time too.
Yes. Talk to you later. Bye.